Hey guys, and welcome to this new class in the course on Aerospace Engineering, Aircraft Systems and Avionics. Today we will be discussing the basics of the Nomatic system. Right, so the first thing to take into account is that the Nomatic system is a self-contained network of components that take in, transmit, distribute and utilize high-pressure air in an aircraft. The very nature of air means that this system is usually related to inflammable components, okay? It is also lightweight, simple, and importantly, okay, this system actually can provide a lot of air, meaning that it is almost unlimited supply, right? Okay, so how do we obtain high pressure from the different sources of our aircraft? Okay, how can we actually get the air inside of an aircraft and it being high pressured? Right, so if you actually think of where we would have in an aircraft the highest pressure values of air, you instantly think of the aircraft engines, okay, because of the fact that the aircraft engines are working at very high pressures, meaning that we simply take all this, we take some of the air which is moving through the engine and we just take it inside of the aircraft. This is what is known as the bleed air, okay, as air that has bled from the engine towards the aircraft, inside of the aircraft. In addition, we also have the auxiliary power unit, which can be used, and also we can actually just simply provide air into the aircraft by connecting it on the ground. Of course, this can only be done in operations before takeoff or after landing. Right, so the components of the Nomatic system are actually very reasonably clear, okay? And so the first thing that you have to take into account is that we will be using either the engine or the APU, okay? Now, the engine has a high pressure port, an intermediate pressure port, okay? Meaning that we can actually gather several a range of values of pressure from the inside of the engine, okay? And by adjusting the high pressure valve, we can actually adjust the pressure that we are taking into the system or into the Nomatic system, right? We also have a bleed valve, which is related to the fact that we will have air coming from that engine, and a pre-cooler, which will be cooling down the air which is coming from high pressure, so high temperature air most commonly, okay, which will be coming from the engine. And by doing this, we simply cool it down, and then we have the supply of bleed air which can be used for other subsystems, right? In addition, we also have the APU, as I mentioned before, and the APU bleed valve to control that, and again for the same the same for the other engine. In addition to that, we also have the cross bleed valve, or the X bleed valve, you might see written down. And this valve basically means that if we cannot use, for instance, this engine, okay, or if we let's say it this way, if this engine we cannot use, okay, we would simply use this engine and connect this cross bleed valve, and the engine would operate for all subsystems, all Nomatic subsystems. It's a way of visualizing, okay, that by choosing to connect this cross bleed valve or not, we can always supply energy or air to the different components, subsystems of the aircraft, right? This is the idea, right? So okay, in addition to that, we also have two bleed monitoring computers, okay, BMC1 and BMC2 for each one of the engines, right, which control and monitor the Nomatic system. They are partially redundant, so in the event of a failed BMC, the other BMC can take over most of its functions, okay? Right, so sensors in the vicinity of the hot air ducts detect leakage. If leakage is detected, the BMCs are signaled and they automatically shut down the affected area. Right, so engine bleed air is tapped at two compressor ports known as the intermediate pressure and the high pressure port, which is what we mentioned before, right? The high pressure port only provides air when the intermediate pressure is insufficient. Now the system automatically controls the delivery of air from the HP port using an HP valve. Right, so as I mentioned before, the pre-cooler uses cold air from the engine to cool the bleed air, okay? And the Apple bleed air has priority over the engine bleed air. The engine bleeds valves will therefore remain closed whenever the Apple bleed valve, okay, is on. Right, so this is a bit of the idea that I want you to get from this initial part of the system, okay? So again, by checking the whole system, you can see that this is what the the gauge, what the pilot would see, and as you can see, you can have we have different variables such as the pressure, the temperature, okay, on the different valves. You can see the high pressure, intermediate pressure, okay, over here, and again, the temperatures and pressures of the different systems.